everybody, and welcome back to Xenoject Studios. Today we're going to be starting a video series called Don't Mind the Mess, and it is going to be a compilation of Fursuit tutorials. This is also the day that I revealed that I am not actually a possum, and I can feel your disappointment radiating from the screen. So basically, the quick backstory of this tutorial is a very long time ago at around 2022, I had this character called Super Pop. And I believe it was either this year or last year when I had sold her to a friend of mine, and now they are going to be getting a 2.0. And I wanted to use this 2.0 as an opportunity to be making tutorials. Although I wouldn't call this design basic, the principles of the steps that we are going to take can be applicable to any species or any amount of design. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the tutorial. Hello and welcome to the floor. So one of the things that can get us started is making a big side profile drawing of the suit that we want to make. Of course, you wouldn't have to do this if you already have an existing pattern that you want to use over and over, but because I want every single suit that I make to be unique, I use a different pattern every time. Now, of course, you can go out and you can buy big sheets of like banner paper, but I don't like to do that, and it's cheaper to just get like a notebook and some tape and make a big square like this. And for this part, we're going to be using two different markers. I'm going to be using a black marker, and I'm going to be using a lighter color marker. The reason why you're going to need two different pens is that this is going to be sketching out how you want it, and then you can go over it with the black marker for lines that you actually, want for it to look like. It'll make more sense when I show it. Another really important part of this tutorial is that it's not a bucket head base. We are doing this based off of a mannequin or Ed head, so if you don't have one of these, you're not going to be able to do this tutorial, probably. I guess you could figure it out. So first things first, I usually have like a template that's already traced out of the head, of the side profile, but I lost it, so I'm gonna have to do it all over again. Understand the orientation of this. Putting the head like on the paper, but not like right on the edge of the paper, like give it like 2 inches maybe extra. And we're just gonna go ahead and take our lighter marker and trace that. We're also going to go ahead and put a line as to about where the mouth and eyes are. So like that. And once you have this all laid out, you can go ahead and start sketching. There is not really like a principle to this, just as long as your fursuit mouth lines up with your actual mouth and the fursuit eyes line up with your actual eyes. I got the basic sketch of the head. The horn parts and the teeth are not necessary to draw. I just wanted to draw them to like make my vision seem more clear. That's not important either. Again, just for visions. And so now that we have that, we're gonna go ahead and do some extra line work to kind of break apart all of our pieces. So first I'm gonna go ahead and go in front of the nose. Draw a line right here. That way we can extend we can extend the muzzle out, and that'll be our foam piece. We're gonna do the same thing for the jaw. I'm just gonna draw a line there to separate the jaw. And then we're gonna go ahead and add a line that connects the part of the eye to the mouth. And we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing right here. We're gonna meet at this point and the eye. That way it flows nice. We're also gonna go ahead and add a line from the edge of the mouth to go along with the curve of the cheek, like that. And I'm gonna also go ahead and add a brow piece. So it's gonna be like a bean shape. Shape, and it goes over the eye. It's going to accentuate the eyebrow. And now, depending on what you want to do, you can add the nose as a part of the muzzle when you sculpt it, or you could not. No, I'm not going to add it. Again, you can add the nose to your muzzle sculpt if you want. I'm not going to do that. This whole thing will all make sense when we actually start cutting out the foam. You know, you probably should watch the whole tutorial all the way through before you do any of this step by step. And to be extra careful, we're gonna go ahead and add a couple of these little darts here. And when you put the specific pieces together, they will line up. And so you remember like which piece goes where. So we're gonna go ahead and set our sketch aside. And now we're gonna take our scuba knit, and this is going to be our balaclava and our lining. And what we're going to do first is we are going to fold it in half to make a pretty sizable fold. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing that we did on the sketch. We're going to take our head, and we are going to sketch out the head. But with this part, you're going to be very general. When we were doing our sketch, it was very close to like being around the head, but we're actually going to allow a lot of extra room, especially near the neck and chin part, and especially at this dip in the back of the head that leads to the neck. That way it's easier to slip on, because this part of your head is going to be really hard to slip into this tiny little hole for the neck. I'm going to use a Posca pen. There are certain fabric pens out there that are white and are specifically used for dark fabric and to outline dark fabric. So a very general line, like going from here and then tapering off, and it's like you can barely see the bump of the nose. Yeah, just being like very general with the shape, adding a lot of room. And don't worry if it's too big. When you actually put it on the mannequin head, we can go ahead and we can make it smaller or bigger later on. The next part is you are going to take some pins, and you are going to pin it all the way around this line, not here where the neck ends. You're going to keep that part open, that way you can slip it on. Alright, so now once you've got it pinned almost all the way around, again excluding the neck, we're going to take our scissors and we are going to cut, I'd say about maybe 3/4 of an inch. It doesn't have to be precise, just enough to where you get seam allowance from it. Okay, now we have our cutout lining. It's gonna look like that. And this is definitely something that you can hand sew, but because it's such like a big line, we're gonna go ahead and sew it on the sewing machine just to save time. So we're gonna go ahead and go over some sewing machine basics. You're gonna go ahead and have a bobbin that is full. We can go ahead and create a new bobbin right here, but just to show you how to use one or fill one. You're gonna need your thread. You're also gonna need a place to put your pins when you're taking them out, putting them through the sewing machine. Do not sew over your pins. It could break your needle, and that could fly anywhere. It could fly into your face, and that would hurt. So take out your pins when you're using your machine. The way to fill a bobbin is you are going to need an empty bobbin. So we got one of those. Looks like a little wheel. And we are going to take our thread and we're going to take our bobbin. You will see that the bobbin has these little holes along its rim. You're going to take your thread and you are going to thread that inside the bobbin, and the end of the thread's going to come out, so it's going to look like that. At the top of the machine, you're going to see a couple of prongs. You're going to see this one, and then there's going to be this one. It's going to have this tab next to it, and then we have this right here. You might see that there's a little wire in this notch. And so what we're going to do is we are going to take our spool and we're going to put it on this first prong right here. And then we are going to take our thread and we are going to go underneath that notch. Then we are going to wrap around this wheel from the bottom and then go back and then go front. There we go. And just so that the bobbin is ready for me, I'm going to go ahead and loop it a couple of times. That way it doesn't come apart. We're going to take it, we're going to put it on this other peg right here. This dial can only turn forwards. Do not turn the dial back or else that'll mess up the engine in the machine. We're going to go ahead and turn our machine on. That light will turn on, and we are going to make sure that your presser foot is lifted. There's going to be a notch on the inside. You will see your presser foot's going to go down. You're going to make sure that that is up. You're also going to have a feet pedal that's going to be placed under your sewing machine table. That's called, I'm going to go ahead and call it the throttle, because that's kind of what it is. You're going to push this peg over here. It's not going to break, it's just kind of tough. And you're just going to go ahead and put on your throttle, and it's going to spin. And it's going to spin the thread onto your bobbin. Again, go as fast as you want. And you'll see that on the tab next to it, the thread's gonna get closer and closer to that tab. And once it starts like scraping the tab, that's when you know that your bobbin is full. I hope you can hear me. All right. There we go. Our bobbin is full. You can see that it is right against the tab right there. We're gonna push it back, take it off, and we're just gonna cut it. And there we have a full bobbin. If you see it, there's gonna be this little cover. You're gonna slide it back. It's gonna take it off. You're gonna take your bobbin, make sure the thread is coming this way. You're gonna insert your bobbin. But if you look on the inside, you're gonna see that there is a little metal tab right here and then a little notch right next to it. You're gonna take your thread, you're gonna take it and pull it underneath that notch, right, like that. And if you see this little like loop thing here, you're gonna, sorry, it's really hard to focus on the camera and also do this. And you're gonna insert the thread into that loop. There's gonna be a little blade on the end of it. And so you're just gonna, it's gonna cut off the end of your thread. And your bobbin is inserted. And now the next thing we need to do is thread the machine. We're gonna go back up on top here. We're gonna unthread this because we're doing something else. And you might even have a machine that has instructions on it. And for threading the machine, we're gonna be using this one. So basically just going inside the latch, the notch, sorry. We're gonna go down. You can pull on the thread a little bit. And we're gonna go down underneath this dial. There's gonna be a little spot underneath the dial for it. Gonna go up, and if you move your dial towards you, you can see this little thing come up, right? And so we're gonna go ahead and do that. We're gonna take our thread, we're gonna go to the right side of that, and we're gonna pull it, and then it's gonna go into the back. You're gonna pull it forward, and it should be latched on the inside. Then we're gonna go ahead and go down here, and you'll see underneath there is a tab, and you're gonna take your thread, you're gonna put it behind this little tab right here. I'm gonna go ahead and put down the phone so I can thread it in, but basically you're taking your thread and you're putting it through the front of the eye of the needle right there. Okay, I went ahead and thread the needle through the front and then had the thread coming in the back. It's gonna go underneath the presser foot on this little notch right here, and it's gonna end over here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna keep this relatively long, and we're gonna go back up to our dial, and we're going to again turn it towards us. And if you look over here, thread's gonna go in, and it's gonna wrap around the bobbin thread. Go ahead and like make a couple of passes at that, and once your needle is up and out of the presser foot, you can take your scissors and you can glide it underneath the presser foot. It will catch both strings of the bobbins. I know you can't really see it, but it's right here. Just a little string, and then you can pull it. And your machine is threaded. Now, I have had some trouble with getting this thread from the needle to wrap around the bobbin thread and pull it up. If that does it to you, there's nothing wrong with the machine. You're not doing anything wrong. Sometimes it just doesn't catch, and you're gonna have to try a couple of times. So next we're gonna go ahead and take our plate, and we are going to go flat, and push it in. And now we are ready to sew. We are going to start with the edge of it. Remember, the fabric is going to go back into it. And if you remember when we drew our lines, I know mine are extremely messy, but I'm using like the outside of the whole line. You're going to sew along that line. Do not sew above it, do not sew below it, on that line that you drew. What we're going to do is we're going to take the edge of the fabric, make sure that the line that we made lines up with the needle, and if you can't see it, you can go ahead and lean as far as you can, or if you want, you can just like slide it inwards and kind of like keep it level. One thing that I like to do is using the edge of the presser foot here to determine how deep I need to make my stitch. So we are going to take the tab that I explained earlier, we are going to push it down, and I'm going to go ahead and take this first needle out because it's clamped down by the presser foot. And I'm going to go ahead and put my foot on the throttle. I'm going to lean close, so sorry if that looks weird. You're going to go for like maybe half an inch, maybe an inch, something like that, not too far. If you see that this tab right here, this little arrow, this is your reverse, so you're going to push down on it. Your reverse may look different from mine, but that's how my reverse works. And you're going to hold it, and you can see that your stitches are actually going backwards. So what this first little pass does is basically it makes stitches and then reverses the stitches, puts stitches over the original. That way the overall stitch does not come apart when you're done with it. And now you can just go ahead and sew around. If your needle is still down by the end of your stitch, you're going to go ahead and move your dial again. It'll bring it up. We can bring up our presser foot and pull it. And you'll see, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but you'll see that there's a notch up here on the side of the machine. You can just go ahead and go over that to release it. If you want to cut off the tails, then cut off the tails. You do that on both sides. There we go. And you may see that the side of it's all scrunched up right here. It's all scrunched up right here. Like, that's not nice. So what we're going to do So we're gonna take our scissors and we are gonna go onto the very side of the neck, like right in the middle. And so now your balaclava just kind of sits nice. My fault, I accidentally made it too big, but that's okay. Sometimes we make mistakes. Even I make mistakes. So of course, you can use pins, or you can use these things, sewing clips. Pretty much does the same thing as pins, but they're bulkier but easier to use. And so I'm just gonna go ahead and go to the top and basically clip top of the head. And now once it actually starts to fit well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it off. I'm going to cut and sew that part together to make it, you know, more snug. I'm gonna do an extra line, kind of just going along with the edge of the clips. Take your needle, you take your thread, and okay, take your needle, you take your thread. You're just gonna thread it, thread your needle, that's it. And you're gonna do a pretty long thread. You're gonna double up your thread. That's how you do it when you hand sew. And there's your long thread. You're just gonna take the end. You're gonna tie it in a knot. You're gonna tie a double knot. Now we have a double knot for our balaclava. So I've got a different thread for you guys here. This is gonna be a red thread, because I'm going to teach you how to do a basic bed stitch, and this is going to be a very vital stitch that we're going to be using for the rest of the tutorial. For the rest of the tutorial, oh my goodness! What we're going to do is, hopefully that focuses. Hello, thank you. We're going to go to the edge where the original thread was cut off. We're going to take our needle. And we're gonna go a little bit behind where the thread was cut off. That way it's extra secure. You're gonna go ahead and insert your needle, you're gonna pull it, and for extra security, we're gonna take the end of it. And because it's a double thread, it's gonna have a loop on the end of it. And we're gonna insert the needle into that loop. We're gonna pull it, and there we go. That's the start of our stitch. What we're gonna do is we're gonna insert it. You're gonna thread it all the way through. Go ahead and pull on this, that way you can see the loop that we make. You see the loop? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our needle. We are gonna go inside that loop, like that. We're gonna go inside that loop that we just made, and we are going to pull our needle through it, through both threads, because it's a loop. That's both threads. You see here that the loop that we just made and the needle going through it. You're just gonna pull. You're gonna pull it tight, and that is a bed stitch. And you're gonna keep doing that. You're gonna keep doing that. And you can see from the bed stitch, you have a stitch going up, you have a stitch going across, and then you have a stitch going back down, a stitch going across, going back down. And that's basically the pattern for what we're doing. I'm gonna go ahead and do it one more time for you. Going in with the needle, pulling it until we have a loop. And then we're gonna go inside, sorry, I'm watching the camera, inside that loop, and we're gonna pull. And now we have some bed stitches. And now we're gonna teach you how to use a seam ripper. This is a pretty important tool, especially if you mess up. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna slide it underneath one of your thread stitches right here. You can go in there, or if you're doing like a whip stitch or like going across like a sewing machine, going inside the thread, you're gonna go inside the thread, and you are just basically gonna push it. And now that thread is broken. You could go ahead and keep doing this, and then once you've gotten enough, you can just pull out your thread. Okay, and I went ahead and did stitches all, come on, focus. I went ahead and stitched all the way around in the way
way to end a stitch. You probably won't be able to see it because the thread is black, unlike how I did with the tutorial using red thread. But anyway, just when you're done with the stitch, I just go ahead and tie it. Oh my gosh, where to focus again? Just like tying it in a knot. There we go. Tying it in a knot, tying it in a second knot, and then you take your thread, you insert it back into the fabric. That way the tail can be hidden. Doesn't really matter because it's gonna be on the outside where you won't be able to see the stitches, but we're gonna do that anyway. Cut it off, and then your stitch is done. Remember when we did the cuts in our lining? We're gonna go ahead and take tape measure. Like I said, tape measure. We're gonna measure out how long those cuts were. We're gonna just measure one side. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take our extra scuba knit. And we're gonna measure out that same amount. Your cut might be longer, it might be shorter, depending on how you first drew out your lining. But mine was 5 1/4. So I'm gonna go ahead and draw out a line. This is gonna be a little bit hard to explain. Not a 45-degree angle, a little bit less than a 45-degree angle. And we're gonna draw that line again from one of the points. Alright, so now we have this really tall triangle. I'm gonna add a curved line that connects these two, so now it looks like a pie slice. And what we're gonna do with that is we're gonna cut it out. Again, remember to add seam allowance. Especially for pieces like this, where it's a very sharp edge at the end, we're gonna go ahead and round that out. Alright, now we have these two triangle pieces. What we're gonna do next is we are gonna take our lining, balaclava thing, and we are going to pin the edges together. And then you're gonna do that same bed stitch that I taught you earlier, going all the way around. Now we have these two triangle pieces sewn on either side of the neck. You can go ahead and start building from here, but what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I am going to make a little bit of an extension down here for the lining. And I'm gonna do one for the back as well. So the way we do that is we are going to take plastic wrap, we're going to tuck it underneath the lining. We have the bottom wrapped in plastic wrap. I'm going to teach you how to pattern things. I'm going to go ahead and start taking strips of duct tape and putting it barely along the edge of the lining that we made. I'm only going to do half because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the mirrored side. Again, this is a very important lesson for later on. So I just taped one side, and then when we cut this out, we're going to flip it over, and that way we have two pieces and it'll be covered all the way around. Again, this will make a lot more sense when we actually get to that part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a marker, I'm going to draw out the curve of the neck. So what we're going to do is we're going to just cut out and with that I'm going to go ahead and trace this part out on the scuba knit, and I'm also going to make a mirrored piece, so I'm going to have it laying like this, and another piece that's laying like this, that way I have both sides. So as you can see, we have two of the same pieces cut out. Here's one side that is not mirrored, and one side that is mirrored. And so now we have one for the left side and one for the right side. What we're going to do is we are going to take these two pieces, we're going to join them right here. Now that you have all that sewn up, what we're going to do is we're going to take our balaclava and this strip here, making sure that this seam matches up with this seam in the front. Use my sewing clips to clip the rest of it. We're going to go ahead and sew it all together. Next part, you can see that it's kind of like curling up a little bit. You can just like give it a tug and it'll start to relax the stitches. Not too bad to where like you rip the stitches open, just enough to help it flatten out. An extended neck, and our balaclava base is all done. Next up, we're gonna go ahead and take our measuring tape, and we're gonna go ahead and measure how long the face is. We're gonna go to like about where somebody's hairline would be to about like the line of the chin. Back on the floor again, we're gonna take some of the foam. This is 1 inch. And we are going to take our measuring tape and we're going to measure out a cross that has 9 inches going one way, and we're also going to mark the center of that. So half of 9 inches is 4.5, and we're going to go ahead and turn again. We're going to stay at that 4.5 mark, and we're going to mark for 9 inches once more. And now we have these 4 different points. We're basically just going to freehand a circle. And now we have a circular piece of foam. We're going to cut that out. So with the foam circle that we just cut out, we're going to use a hot glue gun. And there's a little bit of a trick to this. What we're going to try and do is we are going to avoid gluing in the nose and mouth area. So if we like put it right up to the face, that this little marking in the middle kind of matches the tip of the nose. So I'm just going to put a marking like around that. It's going to be almost a gumdrop shape. And then we're also going to do the same thing for like the eyes. So those are about where the eyes might be. And the reason we're doing this is because when we glue it down to the face, we're eventually going to cut out these pieces of foam when we are building the rest of the head. This will make sense later on. So just taking your glue gun and gluing pretty generally around those areas to avoid them. And we can go ahead and start moving into sculpting the actual head. We're back to the sketch that we made in the beginning, and what I'm going to do first, I've already made some cuts because I messed up and I'm redoing it, is I'm going to cut out the muzzle piece first. We're going to start with the muzzle, and we're going to go ahead and take our foam. And we are going to trace this piece 4 times. So all of our muzzle pieces are glued together into this one big like chunk. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it from the side about right here, I think, is where I am going to make this little marking to replicate the the mouth of a canine, because we're doing a canine for this, and making sure that it's curved at that point. Make sure it's also fairly equal. Right? Now we're going to go ahead and extend those lines. So now we have this big piece in the middle that we drew out, and we're going to go ahead and carve that out real quick. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my scissors
I'm gonna pretty much just shove it into the foam like that and just cut. Now we have a big old space in the center that we carved out, and you may see that the muzzle doesn't really look so much like a muzzle. So we're gonna go ahead and carve it down. The way that you carve it down is, you know, starting off like horizontal to the edge and like taking pieces from it. And once you've got that taper, you can go ahead and do your scissors like perpendicular and take off very small chunks. Very, very small. That way the slope is a lot more smooth and it looks a lot more natural. Now that I have smoothed it out a good amount, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these corner pieces like right here and I'm going to cut them off. That way the eyes are able to like peek over the muzzle and the wearer can actually see. So next step, I'm going to go ahead and take the muzzle piece. I'm going to get some glue. I'm going to put the mannequin on its side, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the muzzle and glue it like that. But to not fight gravity, I'm going to put it like this. After we've glued on the muzzle piece, we're going to go ahead and go back to our pattern. I've taped the muzzle piece that we cut out back to the pattern, and then I went ahead and cut out this specific section, and so we're going to go ahead and take this, and we're only going to make 2 of them. We're going to take these pieces and we are going to glue them to the side of the muzzle and to the side of the face. I'm going to go ahead and shave down the side of the circle. The next piece I'm going to do, because the mouthpiece is so thin, it's about as thick as the foam itself, so I'm just going to freehand a piece for the mouth, and it's going to be 4 inches wide. To make the mouth more natural, I'm going to draw a line on the inside, like that, going along the same sort of edge. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with the muzzle and carve it out. I'm also going to add, a little extra here. That way I know how deep it's supposed to go. I'm done carving out the inside of the mouth, and I'm now just going to go ahead and smoothen it down. The next thing I'm going to do to this mouthpiece is I am going to add a curved edge on the inside. There we go. That way it goes along with the curve of the face. Now I'm going to go ahead and glue it on. I did the same thing with the mouthpiece that I did with the muzzle. Taped it back on. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a little bit less. Again, same thing I did with the muzzle. And I'm going to cut this whole piece out right here. While we're here, I'm going to take this same job piece pattern and I am going to draw out another line for cheek piece to elevate it. To make things easier on myself, I'm going to attach the extra cheek pieces I made to the jawline. Now that the jaw piece and the cheek piece are combined together, I'm going to go ahead and press it from the edge of the mouth. Basically just lining it up with the rest of the mouth and lining this specific piece up with the mouthpiece we have already attached. Next part on the chopping block is going to be this upper area, and I had talked about this before that the eyebrow piece is going to be separate. So we're going to cut out the big piece first, and then we're going to cut out the brow piece second from that. The way we're going to put on this piece is not by starting at the muzzle, but actually starting at the back over here. It's time to move on to the brow pieces. I went ahead and picked up my pattern again to see like which part of the point right here goes inwards and which point goes out. So I'm gonna start gluing those on. While those are settling, I went ahead and looked over the shape of the sides, and if you see it from the front angle, it looks a little strange. So a couple of changes I'm going to make is basically elevating the side of it. So about like right here, adding a piece in this little part right here, so that way it goes with the curve of the mouth. And to really make this part especially pop out, you'll be able to see like the edge of the mouth. I'm gonna go ahead and add another curve right here. That way it sort of tapers as it goes up and it's nice and puffy. So back on the floor here, I have the two original patterns for the top part of the mouth and also the cheek piece. And I already went ahead and drew the lines where I want it to be elevated. I'm just gonna cut those out. Now that all of our pieces are settled in, it's time to go ahead and do the carving. So this part is going to take a especially long time compared to the other steps that we have done. Remember what I taught you about carving the muzzle smooth? You're going to make sure that your scissors are perpendicular to the side of the foam. It's okay to go ahead and go like this to take off bigger chunks, but to actually smooth it out, you have to go perpendicular and take small pieces off. When smoothing down all of your foam, it is very, very important to take care of your hands when you are cutting. Constantly doing motions like this is going to make your hand cramp. It is going to rub on your hand. It is going to hurt a little bit. So if your hand starts to hurt, then stop, take a break, take care of your hands. Don't die. After sculpting the right side of the face, I realized that it still looked a little bit flat, and so I went ahead and took a piece of scrap foam reshaped it and then pinned it to see if that would help. And I think I'm going to go ahead and add that on. It's always important to have a lot of patience when sculpting, so that way everything can remain really smooth by the end of it. You can probably see that there is a lot of texture, and that's all the places where I had smoothed it out. And so the fur can lay nicely on top of the foam. So cutting out the eyes may be a little bit difficult, and there is a little bit of a trick to it. You want to be able to cut like this, going along the rim, and not just cutting straight into it like this. Cut along the rim. That way the eye blanks sit nicely in the head when we get to them. Now that we have the eye spaces cut out, we're going to go ahead and move on to the mouth. I'm going to take the head off the mannequin for this one just to make it easier. After you cut out the mouth, it's going to look something like that. Just like a really big space on the inside. Now we're going to move on to the eyes. You're going to need the eyepiece that you drew out on your base sketch. You're also going to need some foam. I'm using white craft foam, but you can use any color that you need. You're going to need some buckram. You're going to need a pen. You're going to need scissors, and you're going to need hot glue. So we're going to take that same eye sketch in our foam. I drew out a large circle on the back, and we're going to go ahead and cut that out. So now that what we have is essentially a ring, we're going to go ahead and draw it out with a pen. Now that you have two of them traced out, you're going to very carefully cut them out and be as precise as you can. Now that we have two rings cut, I'm going to set them aside, and I am going to use the long edge of the foam, and I am going to cut about that much. So now we have this one long, very wide strip, and we're going to cut that in half. And what we're going to do is we are going to take the ring that we made, and we are going to glue the edge of this to here. You want to make sure that the foam is going up from the clean side, so that way it forms a cup. This part is going to take a lot of patience as well. We are going to take the very edge of this foam, and we are going to add just barely any amounts of glue to the edge of it. Take it, and we are going to glue it to the edge of the foam. And we're going to do it section by section. That way it stays in one place and it'll be easier to manage. You may notice that once we get to the end here, your foam strip is going to be longer than it is going around the eye, and that's a pretty easy thing to take care of. You just match the edge on the underside, and I am just going to cut it. And so now we're going to go ahead and finish it off by adding some more glue here. Now we're not going to go ahead and close off this seam quite yet. Once your glue is all settled, we can go ahead and hold these together. Make sure not to burn your fingers. And we are going to add some glue to the outside. Once your eye is completely settled, go ahead and set it aside, and you're going to make a second one. So to set up for painting eyes, you're going to need a surface either you don't care about or a surface that is covered. You're of course going to need your eye mesh, and you're also going to want to make sure that your eye mesh is big enough to hold both of your eyes, your eye blanks. You're also going to need some squares of scrap foam. You're going to need a palette. Sorry, mine hasn't been cleaned out yet. And you're also going to need your choices of acrylic paint. What I recommend is that you use acrylic paint that is specifically made either labeled multi-surface or labeled indoor-outdoor, and that is going to be a lot safer and less likely to chip in comparison to regular acrylic. You're also going to need a fairly small or skinny brush. That way you can paint on any very small details that you need. I highly recommend drawing out the design of your eyes first before you paint them and using them as reference as you go along. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take one of these scrap foam squares and I am going to pat a little bit into the paint. Off to the side, I'm going to just like dab it on the paper towel. I'm going to get some more paint. There we go. Dab it off. So you got sort of a almost transparent surface. And on your mesh, you are going to lightly, very lightly, press into the mesh. The reason why we're using the scrap foam instead of a paintbrush to do this is so you are less likely to accidentally fill your mesh holes with paint, and then your wearer won't be able to see. If your paint ended up filling some of the holes in the mesh, it's a pretty simple thing to fix. All you're going to need is a really clean pin needle, and then just inserting it into the holes that have been painted shut. Be very careful as you do this. Sometimes it may scratch up the paint and you will have to redo it. Once you are satisfied with your design, you're going to go ahead and cut them in half. So this part is going to be a bit delicate. We are going to glue the eye mesh to our eye blanks, and this can definitely be a little complex. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take my glue gun, I'm going to take my eye blank, and then once our eye blank is glued, we are going to carefully set it on top and make sure everything is center. I'm going to quickly flip it over and add
pressure, just sort of pinching it, both the inside and the outside. Once your glue has set, we are going to go on the back of the eye blank, and you could see the outline of the eye blank on the other side. You're going to take your glue gun and you're going to put a layer of glue on top of that mesh. And again, once that glue has settled, we are going to take our scissors and you are going to cut the excess mesh on the sides. And now your eyes are all done. Once we get back to the eye sockets, we are going to go ahead and do a lot of test fits to make sure that our eye blanks fit into the sockets respectively. And if it doesn't go in all the way, you're going to have to trim up some of the foam around the eye socket. So you may notice with the eyes that there is a good amount of room surrounding them on both sides, and that is going to be corrected with our next step. The next step, what we're going to do is we are going to cut out the fabric in here. Make sure to keep a little extra all the way around for seam allowance. So here we are with the holes cut open, and if you look in there you can see that there's a little bit extra on all sides of the eye. And if you do have spots where the glue had, seeped past the eye hole more than you intended, you may notice that scuba knit is actually 2-layered. So there's a top layer and a bottom layer, and you can use that second layer to your advantage when we are lining the eyes. Back onto the mannequin, we're going to be doing the same thing that we did when we patterned out the neck, and we are going to be using small strips of duct tape to cover this inner rim right here. Once the inside of the socket is all taped up, I'm going to go ahead and draw a circle around where I want the lining to end. Now once you do that, I'm also going to add a couple of lines to indicate where the top and bottom corners of the eye are. The eye blanks have a little corner. If your eyes are perfectly circular, that may make this part a little bit more difficult, but with some patience, you'll still be able to achieve it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut the lines. At this point, the rain had gotten super loud, so basically what I'm doing is just putting the duct tape piece onto the plastic wrap like we did for the neck pieces. And then I am tracing them out on some scuba knit and then cutting them out again like I did with the neck pieces. I then begin sewing the two edges together, both on the traced side. I went ahead and labeled which one was mirrored and which one was the original. I accidentally sped that first part up. You just reverse it and then start sewing the edge onto the extra seam that you put onto the eye, so that when you flip it out, the seam is underneath touching the foam. After you've sewn in your eye rim pieces, you can go ahead and flip them back out, and it's going to look like this. And in the meantime, I am going to pin them in place. Once we have them all pinned in place, we're going to go ahead and set them back onto the mannequin head. And now
we are gonna go ahead and start gluing.
I'm going over and picking it up section by section and pulling it firmly onto the foam. Not enough to rip the seams, but enough to have it snug.
Once all the glue from your eye sockets have set, you can go ahead and start fitting in for the eyes.
It's always really important to be constantly checking if your eyes are in a symmetrical direction before you glue them down.
And you are going to use your glue gun and you are going to glue underneath the rim of the eyelings like this.
When you're gluing around the eye, you're gonna really make sure that you put a lot of glue underneath it to absolutely seal the eyes in. Now I'm just cutting off some of the excess from the lining. You're not gonna be able to see it anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect.
We're gonna go ahead and move on to something that is a little bit complex, and we are going to learn how to put magnetic eyelids onto the suit. This is not a required step, but we are gonna go over it in case it's something that you are interested in. So first what we're gonna do is we are going to take a piece of paper, and you can go ahead and pre-measure the radius, right? Is that a radius? Of the eye going across, and you know how long it is to get there. I'm gonna go ahead and freehand it though. Here's the pattern that I drew up. You can see that it almost has this orange slice shape where it's fairly curved and it has a very slight curve on the bottom, and it looks like it fits pretty well. What I'm going to do, since there are like these gaps around the eye, I'm gonna fill it in with some extra scrap foam.
Here I cut the pattern into some scrap foam. I'm going to take some black felt and then I am going to glue those eyelid pieces onto the felt. Once those have settled, I go ahead and I cut them out, again leaving some seam allowance. This time I am using the pattern again to trace out some shapes on my desired color. You can use felt, you can use fleece, you can use minky, any type of fabric will do. And again, you're going to leave some seam allowance and then you will glue those pieces onto the other side of the eyelid. Now I'm going to teach you an invisible stitch. You're going to go through the top of the fabric with your needle, and then on the other side of the fabric you are going to go in, and then you are going to come back out in a very short amount, and then you're going to pull your needle through all the way, and don't make it too tight quite yet. You're going to go back onto the other side very near that first insertion and do the exact same thing, going in and then coming back out onto the top, pulling it through, not pulling it tight, and you're gonna just keep doing that till you reach about 3 to 4 stitches. A very fun fact about this stitch, it was invented by Jim Henson, which was the guy who made the Muppets, and he developed a stitch to make his puppet felt seams almost invisible on camera. Once you've made a couple of stitches, you're gonna go ahead and pull it tight, and you'll see it almost disappears. You're going to be using that same stitch to go along the edge of your eyelids to make it look very clean. So you can see I'm inserting my needle, going up from the bottom onto the top, and then I am crossing over to the other side putting it in and then putting it back out and pulling. The eyelids are now sewn all the way around on both lids. And now I'm going to do something that I haven't done before. Usually when I apply magnets to the back of the eyelids, I use hot glue. And my magnetic eyelids for customers have had a low satisfaction, you could say. And I did some research and I found out that heat can disrupt the strength of magnets, and I had been using hot glue to attach them. So this time I'm going to be using something different. I am going to be using E6000 to attach the magnets. The settling time will take a lot longer, but I hope that it will have just as strong of a hold and it will not affect the strength of the magnets. Let me remind you that E6000 is still a chemical with fairly harsh fumes, so you want to make sure that the room you are in is well ventilated and that you are wearing the proper protection. I accidentally had my head cover this part. Essentially, you're going to be laying the eyelid onto the foam and then putting a dot where the magnets line up. Yeah. And then I'm going to just pin it in place. Same thing for the other side, making sure that it aligns. I also forgot to properly explain this part. When I mean aligns, I mean symmetrical with the pinned lid. I'm going to mark that with a little red dot. As you can see, I am laying down the magnets one by one, adding a dot of E6000 as I go along. For extra security, I'm putting just a little extra E6000 around the magnets to make sure that when it dries, it's very secure. While I am letting the magnets on the face sit, I'm going to go ahead and start with making the nose. So the way I want to do the nose is I'm going to go ahead and draw out, the shape of the nose and what I want it to look like. I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. Depending on the nose that you're trying to make, the density of which you make the nose out of foam can definitely matter. For me, I'm going to do 2 layers of 1 inch and I'm going to glue them together. Before we start carving to make it smooth, I am going to add one little extra thing to make sure that it forms to the head. Is I am going to add that same sort of hollowing technique that we did on the mouth, and I'm going to draw out where I want to cut. You can also go ahead and just test fit to make sure that the curve of the hollowed out piece that you made with the nose fits along with the snout of the head. And it looks like that mine fits fairly well. Now we're gonna go ahead and carve and smooth down the nose piece just like we did with the rest of the head. Once your nose is formed to the muzzle like you wish for it to be, you can go ahead and glue it on. And now it's time to pattern the nose. This will be a very common occurrence where the curves of a part of the head is going to be very steep, and so you are going to be using smaller and smaller strips of duct tape. And right here, I am just splitting up the nose into a top flat piece and then the bottom piece, which is going to be a lot more curved. This is going to make it so much easier to cut out onto fabric and pattern. We're going to be doing the plastic wrap thing again. When we put down the pieces of the nose, we are cutting small darts into the duct tape to make sure it sits flat onto the plastic wrap. Before we go ahead and cut it out, you're going to make sure that you cut out the plastic wrap in between those darts as well. While I'm tracing out the pieces onto the Minky, you can see I am just flipping it over right next to the original piece. This is going to minimize the amount of sewing that we will have to do. Now you're going to be sewing all of those little darts closed with the bed stitch that we learned. It's very important to do the darts first before you sew the entire nose together. My camera died at that end point. Basically, you're just sewing the top piece to the bottom piece to make the nose complete. The method of which I'm gluing the nose on is gluing that middle seam first and then laying it flat as I glue in sections. That way I can combat any wrinkles that I may come across. The tool that I'm using is a brush cleaner, and it basically just pulls out all of the minky that gets buried within the stitches that I made, so it's a lot cleaner. Now we're moving on to patterning the mouth. You can see that I am putting a lot of overlap. That way it can definitely cover the entire mouth, and it will be tucked underneath the fur later. Your mouth is probably going to be less long and less concave than mine is, so it's going to be easier for you than it is for me in this part. And now I'm going to pattern out the inside of the top of the mouth. Here I am drawing out where I want the mouthpieces to split up, along with how long I want the mouth overlap to be, and I can cut off all that excess duct tape. I'm cutting off the excess first before I try and take out the mouthpieces, just to make it easier on myself. A very helpful tip is taking pictures of the mouth lining before you cut and take them off. So in case you need a refresher of where everything is, you have it documented. We're going to be doing that same thing of cutting darts into the duct tape and then laying it flat onto plastic wrap. This may be a little bit more complex than the other pieces we've done before, just because of how the mouth works, but again, yours is probably going to be a lot less complicated than mine. Then I am just doubling and mirroring every single piece and then sewing all those darts together. We're gonna be here for a while. We're now going to make a velcro tongue. You're going to need about 1 inch to 1.5 inch piece of velcro, not the kind with the sticky backing, but the regular kind. And we are going to take the softer piece and we are going to pin it on top of the bottom piece of the mouth. You don't want to attach it too deep, or else it's going to start scratching on the inside of your chin, and that's not going to be very comfortable. Then you're going to go ahead and put it through your sewing machine. If you look closely, you'll be able to see how I keep the needle down, but I pick up my presser foot to go around those sharp corners. Back to the head, we're going to go ahead and cut out a hole just like we did for the eyes, leaving some seam allowance. This is going to be more tricky because the muzzle is going to be in the way, but if you are patient, you'll be able to get it. We're going to be doing the same thing we did with the eye, putting the quote-unquote rough side inside out into the inside of the mouth and then sewing it to the seam allowance that we put for the mouth. Again, this part is going to be a lot more tricky than the eyes because of the small space, so take your time and be precise. You may notice that I am also using sewing clips on the very end to help me out with keeping the minky stable, and I highly recommend also using sewing clips if you have some. Doing the same for the bottom of the mouth as you did for the top. I kept the bottom part and the smile line separate from the top of the mouth. That way it's easier to turn inside out. Once we turn both pieces inside out, we're going to be using that invisible stitch to put them together, but that doesn't come until later. Next, we're going to be gluing down the pieces. You are going to reverse them and put them to the foam of the mouth. You can see I'm being very meticulous to make sure that there are no wrinkles, like using my whole fist to make sure that the glue settles nicely. I want to make a note that you do not have to use Minky to line your mouth. You could even use the same scuba knit you used for your lining, because Minky can be very susceptible to wrinkles and it's a little bit hard to keep up with, but I am using Minky for the sake of color. Now I'm pinning down some of the edges of the lining to make sure that it is smooth along the foam. One other thing I want to include is that you should not be adding glue all the way to the edge of the lining. That way you can sew through it later. Now I'm turning over the head and doing the bottom part of the mouth. I'm working my way up with the smile line, adding bits of glue as I go along. I didn't include this in the recording, but after I had everything glued down, I went ahead and did that invisible stitch I talked about to stitch the bottom and the top together. Now we're going to go ahead and make the tongue. I am sketching out the shape that I want using the other piece of Velcro to make sure that the width of the tongue is going to work out, and just sketching it completely. After sketching and cutting out the tongue, I take a large piece of Minky, making sure that it more than just fits the tongue on top of it. Now I'm flipping over the Minky onto the fuzzy side, and I am going to be putting that piece of Velcro onto one side, making sure that it is not too close to the top and not too close to the side. I'll be transferring the Minky over onto my machine, doing the exact same thing I did with the softer piece of Velcro. Back over on the desk, we are going to have our fuzzy side up, and then we are going to fold it onto our smooth side, just like this, making sure everything is equal. Then we are going to be pinning the entire edge together. After everything is pinned, we are going to be taking that tongue pattern and we are going to be tracing it out onto the Minky, making sure that the Velcro piece is not touching the edge of the pattern. Now we're going to go ahead and run it through the sewing machine, sewing onto the line. Make sure to be very careful around the curves of the tongue, and also to make sure that the end with the Velcro is kept open. After that, you are going to be taking out all the pins and cutting off all of the tails, and I will be cutting out the tongue from the fabric, making sure to add a good amount of seam allowance. Now you're going to make small micro cuts into that seam allowance. Make sure that you don't cut too deep and that you cut into the stitch that you made, or else it's going to unravel. The reason we're doing this is so that the curve of the tongue actually curves the way we want, and then we're going to flip it all the way inside out. I am using the edge of my finger to make sure that the edge of that stitch is all the way pushed. While making sure that the tongue is flat, you are going to be adding pins to the very edge of the tongue all the way around. This is to make sure that the fabric does not slide around for our next step. I'm going to be inserting it back into my machine, Velcro side up, and at the edge of that Velcro, because we don't want to sew over the Velcro, we are going to stitch a line from that point all the way to the bottom. Again, make sure that you do a reverse stitch at the beginning and end of this pass. After cutting off the tails and removing all the pins, you now have a little extra detail on your tongue to make it more realistic. We are going to be using that invisible stitch to close up the top of the tongue. Here I am testing out the look of the tongue, inserting the Velcro, and now your fursuit has a tongue. The last step we're going to be doing is making the ears. I'm going to be sketching out the ears onto some more notebook paper. You can see I am using a reference for this part. Once you're done cutting out this pattern, you're going to want to test fit it onto the head before you cut it out onto foam. Normally I would trace out the ear pattern onto some EVA foam instead, but since my friend requested that I make wiggly ears, I am tracing it onto upholstery foam. I am using Nefertiti's bouncy ear mini tutorial to make these. Now you're going to want to smooth out the edge of each ear, both on the opposite side so that they are mirrored. I'm taking back my original pattern piece and adding a slope to the back of it. That way it has more structure and the slope of the back of the ear is going to look a lot more natural. You're going to need 1/2 inch foam for this. I took some 1 inch and then just cut it in half down the middle. You're going to smooth out the edges again, making sure to go along with the edge of the original piece. After taping the piece that you just cut out again to your pattern, you're going to be tracing out another piece. This is going to go onto the other side of your ear, and you're going to be using 1 inch foam for this. After gluing them onto the other side, you are also going to be smoothing down these pieces. You're going to take a box cutter and you're going to be cutting shallow cuts along the back of the ear. Always cut away from your hand, not towards it. Please do not slice your fingers. Now you're going to take your scissors and you are going to add shallow cuts to the edge of the ears as well. You're going to glue a long strip of 1/2 to 1 inch elastic to the back of the ear. I accidentally forgot to press record in this part, but basically you're going to glue the top and bottom part of the ear, not the center. Instead, you're going to be gluing a thick piece of elastic both to the ear and to the head. And on the back side, you're going to be doing the same thing with a longer piece of that thick elastic. I really hope you guys enjoyed the part 1 of this head tutorial. If you liked it, go ahead and drop a like, and if you want to see the rest of Don't Mind the Mess, please subscribe. Go ahead and comment down below your thoughts on this tutorial and how I can improve, because this is the first time I've ever recorded a tutorial. And remember to take your meds.